You are suffering right now because you're never fully here. Your mind constantly pulls you into thoughts about the past or anxious projections of the future, leaving you perpetually absent from the only moment that actually exists, this one. This relentless mental time travel is the root of your chronic dissatisfaction, your persistent feeling that something is missing, that life is happening elsewhere or elsewhen. But what if I told you that there is never anything but the present, that this eternal now is all there ever is, was, or will be? Today, I will reveal how your confused relationship with time creates unnecessary suffering and show you the liberation that comes when you recognize the reality of the eternal now. If you continue missing the present moment, you'll never discover the extraordinary richness that's available right where you are. The transformation I'm about to describe isn't abstract philosophy. It's the difference between a life of perpetual seeking and one of profound fulfillment. The most pervasive illusion in human experience is the belief that reality exists primarily in the past and future, with the present as merely a fleeting moment between them. From early childhood, you've been conditioned to sacrifice the now for the not now. Your education was preparation for some later time. Your work is motivated by future rewards. Even your leisure is often documented for future memories rather than present enjoyment. Life, you've been told, is what happens while you're making other plans. The tragedy is that you've come to accept this as normal. Consider how you typically experience time. The past exists only as memory, as images and stories in your mind right now. The future exists only as anticipation, as imagination in your mind right now. Both past and future are actually experiences in the present. Yet you treat these mental abstractions as more real than the concrete reality of this moment. This is the fundamental delusion. The past and future are useful concepts, but they are exactly that. Concepts, not realities. The only reality you ever experience is this present moment, which paradoxically has no duration at all. It is eternally new. Look at nature. A tree doesn't reminisce about springs past or anticipate future autumns. A cat doesn't regret yesterday's missed mouse or worry about tomorrow's meal. They exist completely in the now. Only humans have developed this peculiar ability to mentally absent themselves from the present moment. And this ability, while giving us tremendous advantages in planning and learning, has become a curse. We've forgotten how to simply be here now. The most successful people have reclaimed this birthright of present awareness, while those who struggle remain perpetually elsewhere in their minds, missing the only life they ever have. The most revealing evidence of your time confusion is how rarely you're fully present. When you eat, your mind is on work. When you're at work, your mind is on vacation. When you're on vacation, your mind is on capturing moments for social media or worrying about the return to work. This endless displacement of consciousness creates a pervasive sense of missing out, of never quite being where you are. Observe carefully, and you'll see this pattern in yourself. The constant mental commentary about past and future that prevents you from experiencing the now. Successful people have mastered the art of full presence, while those who struggle remain divided, with attention fragmented across imaginary time. Take a moment right now to notice your breath, not controlling it, just experiencing the sensation of air entering and leaving your body. This simple act brings you immediately into the present moment. Notice how thoughts about past and future try to pull you away from this simple awareness. This constant pull is the source of much unnecessary suffering. The next time you're engaged in any activity, eating, walking, conversing, experiment with giving it your complete attention. Notice the extraordinary difference in the quality of your experience. This is the beginning of living in the eternal now, where life's natural richness reveals itself without effort. Your perception of time creates your experience of life. Most humans live hypnotized by the ticking clock, the turning calendar, the advancing years, mechanical measurements that have come to seem more real than reality itself. Time, as measured by clocks, is a social convention, not an absolute reality. It's a useful tool that has tyrannized its creators. The time of experience, psychological time, expands and contracts according to your state of consciousness. A minute of boredom seems endless. An hour of absorption passes in an instant. This reveals something profound about the nature of time. It is relative to consciousness, not absolute. When you examine time closely, its apparent solidity dissolves. The past is gone. It exists only as memory in the present. The future hasn't arrived. It exists only as anticipation in the present. Even what you call now cannot be grasped. For the moment you try to hold it, it's already gone. So where and when is reality? It is always here, always now. Not as a moment in time, but as the timeless awareness in which all experiences arise. The minds that have shaped our world most profoundly all discovered this same truth. Time is not an external reality, but a mode of perception. Einstein's relativity, Zen's emphasis on presence, quantum physics' observer effect, all point to the centrality of consciousness in what we call reality. Consider the paradox of the present moment. If you try to catch it, it slips away. If you say now, the moment in which you began the word is already past by the time you finish it. The present has no duration in clock time. It is not a moment at all, but the ever-fresh awareness in which all moments appear. This is why there's no particular moment that is the present. The present is not in time. Rather, time appears in the present. Just as all objects appear in space without space itself being an object, all moments appear in the present without the present itself being a moment. This is not abstract philosophy, but the direct reality of your experience right now, if only you look. Try this experiment. For just 5 minutes, be completely present with whatever you're experiencing. Don't label it. Don't judge it. Don't relate it to past or future. Just be with what is. Notice how your habitual time consciousness tries to assert itself, pulling you into thoughts about what happened before or what might happen later. Simply observe this pull without following it. This simple practice begins to dissolve the tyranny of time that governs most people's lives. While others remain entrapped in the mental construct of past and future, you can step into the timeless awareness that is your natural state. Your attitude toward aging reveals the depth of time's illusion. You fear growing older because you believe time is carrying you toward an end. But when you look closely at what you call aging, you find that it only ever happens now. You are never getting older. You are only ever now experiencing the current state of your body. The body changes, certainly, but the awareness in which these changes appear remains timeless. Those who understand this live with extraordinary vitality regardless of age, while those fixated on the timeline of birth and death suffer the psychological weight of time's passage. Consider how consciousness behaves in dreams. In a dream, you can experience what seems like hours or days in what clock time measures as minutes. Sometimes a sound from the waking world is incorporated into the dream narrative, even though the sound occurs at the end of the dream experience. This reveals that dream time is not linear but holistic. The end can affect the beginning. Quantum physics suggests that physical reality may function similarly, with time being more a matter of perspective than a linear flow. The most evolved minds recognize that what we call time is a mode of perception, not an objective reality. The deeper truth is that there is no flow of time at all. There is only ever this eternal now appearing as constant change. It's not that the present moment moves through time. Rather, change occurs within the unchanging context of present awareness. Just as a movie screen doesn't itself move when displaying motion pictures, the awareness in which all experiences appear remains ever present, while the content of awareness constantly changes. This is why great spiritual traditions point to the eternal now, not as a never-ending duration, but as the timeless reality that transcends duration altogether. The fear of death is essentially fear of the end of time. But if time is an illusion, and there is only ever the present, what actually ends? Your body will disperse back into the elements from which it formed. Your individual consciousness will transform. But the eternal now, in which your entire life experience has occurred, that cannot end because it never began. It is the timeless awareness that witnesses the coming and going of all things without itself coming or going. Understanding this transforms your relationship with death completely. It's not that you'll live forever in time, it's that reality exists beyond time altogether. Use your mortality as a perspective shifter. The awareness that your time in this form is limited can awaken you to the preciousness of each moment. Ask yourself, if this were my last day alive, would I be giving my attention to what truly matters? This perspective cuts through the illusion that time is endless and awakens you to the extraordinary value of the present. The recognition of mortality becomes not a source of dread, but an invitation to full presence in the eternal now. The roots of human conflict often lie in this confusion about time. Nations and ideologies fight over narratives about the past and visions of the future, both of which exist only as thoughts in the present. They create rigid identities based on historical stories and then defend these identities violently, never recognizing that these mental constructs exist only in the conceptual realm, not in the reality of the present moment. Look at history's greatest peacemakers. They all shared the ability to be fully present, to see beyond the mental constructs of past wrongs and future fears to the shared humanity that exists now. The most evolved minds understand that healing can only ever happen in the present moment, not by endlessly revisiting the past or bargaining for the future. When you operate from the eternal now, you respond to life as it is, not as your mind says it was or should be. This is the secret of those who create positive change rather than perpetuating cycles of reaction and counter-reaction. The next time you find yourself in conflict, notice how much of it stems from time-based thinking, grievances from the past, anxieties about the future, rather than what's actually happening in the present moment. When you drop these mental projections and deal only with what is, conflict often resolves naturally. This doesn't mean ignoring practical lessons from experience or failing to consider consequences. It means doing all of this from the clarity of present awareness rather than from emotional entanglement with mental constructs about time. True freedom means liberation from the psychological prison of time. Most people define freedom as the ability to fulfill their desires in the future, but this keeps them perpetually unfree, always waiting for fulfillment to arrive later. Absolute freedom comes when you realize that the eternal now is all there ever is, and that complete fulfillment is only ever available in this moment, not because this particular moment contains what you want, but because presence itself is the fulfillment you've been seeking through all your wanting. The most successful people in history were not those who accumulated the most for the future, but those who developed the capacity to live completely in the present. They discovered the secret that what you think you must achieve or acquire to be happy in the future is actually preventing you from experiencing the natural contentment that arises when you're fully present. While others exhaust themselves pursuing future fulfillment, they found the infinitely renewable source of well-being that exists only in the now. Practice this freedom by periodically letting go of all concern with past and future. Start with short periods, even just a few minutes, of complete presence with whatever is happening. Notice how the space created by this time-free awareness fills with a natural aliveness that requires no external cause. This is the beginning of living in the eternal now. The less you're dominated by psychological time, the more you can respond creatively to life as it actually is, rather than to your mental projections about it. Reality is not happening in time. Time is happening within reality. Every experience you have is not located at a point on a timeline, but is the timeless awareness taking the form of this particular experience now. This is not a metaphor or a spiritual belief. It is the literal truth of your existence that becomes obvious when you look clearly. Just as a movie screen is not itself moving when it displays motion pictures, the awareness in which all experiences appear remains timeless, even as it manifests the appearance of time. Consider how your experience of time changes according to your state of consciousness. In states of flow, creative absorption, or deep meditation, the sense of time passing can disappear completely. Hours may pass by clock measurement, but experientially, you are in a timeless state. Similarly, in moments of crisis or extreme danger, time can seem to slow dramatically, allowing for perceptions and actions that would seem impossible in ordinary time consciousness. These experiences reveal that time is not absolute, but relative to the perceiver. The most brilliant minds in both science and spirituality have arrived at surprisingly similar conclusions. Time, as we conventionally understand it, is not an ultimate reality. From Einstein's relativity to the timeless awareness described by contemplative traditions, the evidence suggests that linear time is more a feature of human consciousness than a fundamental aspect of reality. The implications are staggering. The separation between past, present, and future may be, as Einstein put it, only a stubbornly persistent illusion. When you operate from this understanding, life becomes less of a journey through time and more of an exploration of depth in the present. Instead of always preparing for or recovering from life, you actually live it directly. Rather than seeing the present merely as a means to some future end, you recognize each moment as complete in itself. This is not passive. It is the most powerful way to engage with life. Like the athlete who performs best when completely absorbed in the now, you act with greater effectiveness when your consciousness is unified in present awareness rather than fragmented across mental time. Have you noticed how exhausting it is to constantly shuttle between past and future in your mind? The rumination over what happened before, the anxiety about what might happen later, it consumes enormous energy that could be available for living now. When you let go of this mental time travel, that energy becomes available for creativity, for presence, for joy. You stop missing your life and start actually experiencing it. This is the secret of those rare individuals who accomplish remarkable things while maintaining a sense of ease and contentment. Consider how much of your suffering comes from resistance to what is happening now, based on comparisons with the past or expectations for the future. You're experiencing a challenge, but it seems worse because things used to be better. You're enjoying something good, but it's diminished because it might not last. You're engaged in one activity, but you're thinking about what's next on your schedule. Now imagine experiencing each moment freshly without these time-based comparisons and distractions. The same external circumstances might occur, but your experience would be completely different. This is the practical benefit of living in the eternal now. What I've shared with you isn't just philosophy. It's the key to a completely different way of being. The suffering you experience comes not from life itself, but from your mind's confusion about time, the endless comparisons with past and future that prevent you from fully meeting the present moment. When this confusion clears, what remains is a natural joy and peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being any particular way. This isn't about positive thinking or forced acceptance. It's about seeing reality clearly, without the distorting lens of psychological time. This understanding has practical implications for every aspect of your life. In relationships, you become capable of actually listening to the other person rather than rehearsing your response or relating everything to past interactions. In work, you give your complete attention to each task rather than rushing through it to get to something else. In difficulties, you respond to what's actually happening rather than being overwhelmed by catastrophic future scenarios or paralyzed by past traumas. None of this means you can't plan or learn from experience. It means you do these things from the ground of present awareness rather than from habitual time confusion. The realization I'm pointing to isn't something you achieve in the future. It's already the case. You just haven't noticed it yet. The eternal now isn't something you'll experience after enough meditation or spiritual practice. It's what you're experiencing right now, but overlooking because your attention is captivated by thoughts about time. It's like being so focused on watching videos about water that you don't notice you're sitting in the ocean. This recognition might happen suddenly, like waking from a dream, or it might dawn gradually as you become more consistently present. Either way, it's not something you do. It's something you allow by ceasing to do what prevents it. The practices I've suggested, bringing attention to the breath, being fully present with activities, letting go of time concerns periodically, are not meant to create this recognition. They're designed to remove the obstacles to it. They're like clearing away clouds, so the sun that's always been shining can be seen clearly. The time-bound mind cannot achieve timelessness because the very effort reinforces the illusion of time. Instead, the illusion of time dissolves when it's clearly seen for what it is, a useful convention that we've mistaken for ultimate reality. Don't take my word for any of this. Test it yourself. Begin today by questioning your assumptions about time. Notice how your mind constantly refers to past and future, missing the extraordinary aliveness of the present moment. The truth of what I'm saying doesn't require belief. It requires only honest observation. The transformation is already happening. The only question is whether you'll continue to overlook it or allow yourself to awaken to what has always been the case. Remember, you're not a time-bound entity moving from past to future. You're the timeless awareness in which all experiences of time appear. The moments of your life, with all their joys and sorrows, are like waves on the ocean of this awareness, arising, expressing, dissolving, while the ocean itself remains. When you know this, not just intellectually, but in the core of your being, the search ends. Not because you found what you were looking for in time, but because you recognize that what you are is beyond time altogether. The peace you seek is not waiting for you in some imagined future when all your problems are solved. It's available now as the very awareness in which all experiences appear. The joy you long for is not dependent on circumstances being different than they are. It's the natural quality of presence itself when it's not obscured by time-based thinking. Your true nature is already perfect, already complete, already free. The journey is not about becoming something else in time. It's about recognizing the timeless awareness that you've always been. Consider these simple questions. When did you ever experience anything except now? When will you ever experience anything except now? No matter how far back you go in memory, or how far forward in imagination, the experiencing itself always happens now. This isn't mere wordplay. It's the fundamental reality of consciousness. There is only ever this eternal now, manifesting as the endless variety of experiences that constitute your life. When this is clearly recognized, the burden of time falls away, replaced by the freedom of timeless presence. This recognition doesn't mean you can't function effectively in the conventional world of clock time. On the contrary, you become more effective because you're fully present with whatever you're doing instead of being mentally elsewhere. You can still keep appointments, meet deadlines, and plan for the future, but you do all of this from the ground of timeless awareness rather than from time-bound anxiety. You use time as a practical tool without being used by it as a psychological prison. The eternal now is not an abstract concept, but the living reality of your experience. It's not something to be achieved or created, but something to be recognized as already the case. It's the simple truth that there is never anything but the present, not as a fleeting moment between past and future, but as the timeless awareness in which the entire drama of life unfolds. When this is directly realized, life continues much as before externally, but internally everything changes. The burden of time falls away, and what remains is the freedom to be fully alive in the only moment there ever is, this one. This understanding has been at the heart of the world's contemplative traditions for millennia, though often obscured by religious language and cultural overlays. The Zen master pointing to the immediate reality before conceptual thinking. The Hindu sage recognizing the eternal self beneath the flux of phenomena. The Taoist sage flowing with the ever-present Tao. The Christian mystic experiencing the eternal now of God's presence. The Sufi dissolving in the beloved that is always already here. Beyond all their differences, they're all pointing to the same fundamental reality. There is only ever this, here, now. The recognition of the eternal now doesn't negate the practical value of time. You can still cherish memories, learn from experience, and prepare for the future, but you do all of this from the ground of present awareness rather than from identification with the mental timeline. Past and future become useful conceptual tools rather than psychological realities that dominate your experience. Like a skilled craftsman, who knows when to use each tool in the box. You know when to refer to past or future, and when to set them aside and be fully present with what is. Your life, in all its apparent complexity, is simply the eternal now expressing itself as this particular experience, not a story extending from past to future, but the timeless awareness taking the shape of this moment's content. Not a journey through time, but the ever-fresh discovery of depth in the present. Not a series of disconnected moments, but the continuous unfolding of the one reality that has never been absent, never been elsewhere, never been elsewhen. This is the profound truth that liberates you from the burden of psychological time and returns you to your natural state of timeless presence. Like and subscribe for more.